Hi, I'm Jess Hayden. On behalf of the Susquehanna Folk Music Society, I'd like to welcome you to session 5 of today's event, Lamentations and Laughter, the Songs of Ulster in Ireland. Today's residency is the third in a series called Artist to Artist that pairs local artists with artists from afar for a day of mutual learning and discovery. We are grateful for funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, which allows us to produce the show today. The Susquehanna Folk Music Society is located in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, and we sponsor concerts, dances, jams, and coffee houses, and the Susquehanna Folk Festival in the summer. Learn about our events at susquehannafolk.org. Now, a little housekeeping. During the program, we ask that you keep yourself on mute, and we suggest that you watch using speaker view. For those that are interested, captioning is available. Just click on the CC button in the menu of the bottom of the screen. The lyrics of many of the songs performed today can be found on the Susquehanna Folk Music Society website. Also, today's session will be recorded and accessible on our website. Guitar accompaniment for the songs of Ulster is presented by Dáithí Sproule, who's a native of County Derry, who's lived in Minnesota as he's one of Irish music's most respected guitar accompanists. He plays in the band Alton, and Susquehanna Folk Festival audiences may also recognize Dáithí as a member of the Irish trio Trion, along with Liz Carroll and Billy McCombisky, who played at our festival, I guess 3 or 4 years ago. I forget which one. So I'm going to highlight him, spotlight him, and get myself out, and he can go ahead and get started. So take it away.
Thanks, Jess. How are you all doing? I hope you're well. I see one or two friends here. Hi, Cindy. So the description that ended up being in the publicity for this little section covers an awful lot of different themes, really, and more than you could possibly do in this length of time. But so I want to encourage you, if you want to interrupt or send a question, or you're interested in anything in particular that I mention or don't mention, I'd be happy to chat about it. But since the business of guitar accompaniment was used as a heading, I'll just kind of start there. You know, I always try and emphasize to people who are interested in Irish music that there's this fairly unusual element in it compared to other musics that you might hear, in that the music, whether it's instrumental or song, has lived and been developed and thrived as a single line of melody. In the case of singing, you know, there'd be words along with it, and that has continued, you know, back into the mists of time. So what that means is that Irish, in the case of singing, and when I say Irish song, I mean a thing with lyrics, words. But in the case of Irish song, there was no accompanying instrument up till very recently that anybody would be likely to have. There were no chords. There was no. I have this list of what there wasn't in Irish music. And every now and again I think of a new one. So one of them is, obviously, there's no harmony, no chord, no rhythm accompaniment. And you know, if you think of a very highly developed music, but that has those characteristics, then that's going to have interesting effects. Maybe like one of the effects to me, I think, is just that this is a contributor to how beautiful the melodies are. You know, how interesting and beautiful Irish melody is, because, you know, there was nowhere else to hide or to embellish except in the melody itself and maybe the ornamentation or something. But and then another one is kind of funny. I decided eventually to leave and not to add another thing to that, and that is, it's a music that wasn't performed, which is a funny thought, you know. Like, I think that as professional musicians like myself, you know, touring around playing with people, you tend to get, I think, as an audience member or as a person who plays, you kind of get fixated on this thing of performing. but really Irish song was developed in people's houses, sitting around the fire, um, singing to your family. Or you might not be singing to anybody. You might be out in the field and you're just singing to yourself. So there was no need for projection or anything. Now, obviously, there's a certain minority of performance always in the music through the centuries, but generally it was a very quiet, intimate sort of thing. So and I love, even though I have spent my whole life being involved with chords and accompaniment. That's what I was doing as well as singing. I do love unaccompanied song, and so the thing that was mentioned also in their little blurb that I had was based on something I had actually written, was this idea of what can go wrong when you start accompanying music. So like what I like is the idea that, and nobody follows these theories completely. Nobody's 100% consistent, but I like the idea of the phrasing of the way a song is when it isn't tied to an accompaniment. So one of the things about that is that there's a beauty and complexity in unaccompanied phrasing. And the trouble is then that, the guitar came into Ireland, and Britain as well, in a big way in the 60s with the folk boom, and then the rock and roll, all these rock and roll bands with guitars. And immediately it was apparent, I think almost as soon as I started learning the guitar, I started playing when I was 17, that there was an issue here, and I suppose we've all got obsessions, and this has always been an obsession of mine. And I'll give you a practical example. I was thinking of sharing. I think I can share sound, files or whatever, but maybe I don't have to. There was this famous group in the 60s in Ireland called Spiceland. And I'm not laying any blame on them. They're wonderful. But I'm using this as an example of what I am suspicious of. And they had this huge hit with a song called Mary from Dunlow. And so the way they sang it was sort of in this kind of rhythm. Oh, that sounds sort of high. Oh, then fair, that sounds sort of low. What there do we see? Oh, then fare thee well, sweet Donegal, their rosses and we door. So what happens, it's almost like this is part of the tradition of guitar playing, that you set a rhythm pattern. Da, 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 da. So one thing that ends up happening is that the rhythm of the song becomes very metronomic. And then also the rhythm on your instrument is controlling your phrasing. So you're kind of waiting for the guitar to do its bit before you continue singing. Da, 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 da. So and it's, as I say, this particular song, it was very beautiful. But I was getting songs that were unaccompanied. I was hearing them without any accompaniment, or I'd learned them that way. And so I thought a lot about this idea of trying not to ruin the rhythm of the song as it would have been originally, or to put it even more extremely, if you're going to arrange music, I didn't want the people I originally got it from to be appalled by what had happened to it. So like if you think of that song, I mean, I never really heard that particular song unaccompanied, but the natural rhythm of that song to me would be something like, oh, then fare thee well, sweet Donegal, the rosses and Gidor. Like that there. So my theory on, I can't get the, all right, I'm trying to get a key. So my theory about how I would go about accompanying a song, say I have a new song I want to accompany, I take the rhythm of the song as it is first, and then you put in the main beats, like say, oh, then fare fare thee well, sweet Donegal, the roses and Gidor. And then now to fill it out a wee bit. So that's what I'm leaning on then. Oh, then fare thee well, sweet Donegal, the roses and Gweedore. So that would be an example of, I have a better example then of, from another song that I actually do sing a lot. So let's say there's this lovely love song, it's called Lovely Anne. And I heard it on a recording, and it goes like this here. You swains of pity, I pray give ear to me, a wounded lover, in praises of a lady fair, I mean for to discover. That's the first half of the verse. So, I suppose if it was that kind of mechanical, imposing of a rhythm with your accompaniment, it would end up being something like, you swains of pity, I pray give ear to me, a wounded lover. And of course, if you played nice sounding chords and you sang it properly, that still should sound nice. But this is the way I actually sing it, and trying to preserve the rhythm of the unaccompanied song. You swains of pity, I pray give ear to me, a wounded lover, in praises of a lady fair, I mean for to discover. As she tripped o'er yon verdant vale, the feathered warblers from each strain in melody their notes did tune, in praise of lovely Anne. More like that. And I would imagine, that if people heard it the first way, and if I sang it nicely, that they would think that was very nice, But I would hope that if they heard that last way beside it, they would say, oh yeah, there seems to be more interest and complexity and subtlety and actually beauty in the second way. So that's the way I've looked at song accompaniment, and I think it's really important, it's also important, I think, if you're interested in traditional songs, really interested in singing them and accompanying them, to learn them from unaccompanied versions first. So that really means when I just did a workshop the other day, and I was talking about accompanied and unaccompanied, and I suddenly realized what I should be talking about is arranged and unarranged, so that's really the point. So if you get the song that it hasn't been arranged, and that will mean that it's just been sung, and then you listen to that and get the feeling of that in your head, and then try and build on that for your arrangement. Does that make sense? So actually, I sang, if you want to get a really difficult one, and a lot of them are going to be fairly straightforward, and even if the song is rhythmical, it can be rhythmical but not metronomic. So can I think of an example of that? So there was another of the great 60s groups, the Johnsons, had a song called the Newry Highwayman. At Stephen's Green. So let's say a metronomic version of that song would be like, in Newry town I was bred and born, at Stephen's Green now I lie in scorn. I served my time at the saddling trade, but I turned out to be a roving blade. there's nothing terribly wrong with that there. But if I wanted to do it a wee bit more in the spirit of what I'm saying, what ends up happening is that it's not, everything isn't evened out, the notes and the phrasing. It moves towards spoken phrasing, moves towards the kind of rhythm of speech. In Newry town I was bred and born, at Stephen's Green now I lie in scorn. I served my time at the saddling trade, but I turned out to be, yes, I turned out to be a roving blade. So it's a subtle difference, but the strength of your phrasing and the variety is coming from the fact that it's more like the rhythm of speech. And part of the, I'm now babbling about things that interest me, so I hope they interest some of you. But another thing that I notice about singing, whether it's unaccompanied singing or accompanied singing, that intrigues me is that, and this could apply to the phrasing of in any style of music. This could apply to rock or jazz or folk. It doesn't really matter. So it's kind of a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum is what I'm talking about, the phrasing that follows the rhythm like I'm talking. And what ends up happening is you have stresses. If you listen to somebody talking to you, you have a main stress, and then something slows down with emphasis. And then there's this little rush of, articles and prepositions that just babble up, you know what I mean? So that's one way of approaching phrasing. So let's say I was thinking of this song earlier on when we had a little session, and then thought I might sing it later. But there do we see? When to this country first I came, my mind from love was free, and the charms of the female sex had not enticed me. That to me is the natural way for me to sing that song. And as you can see, it's nothing is distorted in terms of how I would say it. When to this country first I came, my mind from love was free, and that's how I'm phrasing it. But then at the other end of the spectrum is the singers they're like an instrument. They're like playing an accordion with long notes or pipes with long notes. And so there's everything in between. But say at the other end, which I don't really do, it would sound more like this here. When to this country first I came, my mind from love was free. And that, so it's harder to do all the lines then, but you need more breath. But that's a way of singing. And so whatever way you get it, I suppose your accompaniment, the rhythm of I believe in trying to be true to the rhythm of the song as it was unaccompanied. And that's sort of, it's in a nutshell for me. Okay. So let me give you an example of a song that was really, really difficult, just for fun. And this is one of the great songs in the Irish language, Dáithí. So this one was one that I heard. I have these seminal experiences. For a lot of people, just one album, one CD can have a huge influence in your life, or one person. So this vinyl album I got when I was about 14 or 15 was given to me, and it was Seamus Ennis, the great piper and folklore collector. And I'd never heard of Seamus Ennis, and I'd never heard of the Uilleann Pipes, which he was playing. I'd never heard of the Uilleann Pipes. I think there was maybe one Uilleann piper in Derry at that time, Derry City, or County Derry for all I know. And anyhow, the songs, I learnt the songs, and I just loved the whole thing. And any gig I do, I'm quite likely going to sing one of the songs from it. In fact, last night I did this concert set. I sang 2 songs from this one album. So there's this great air, Dáithí, the Dark Woman of the Valley. And it's one of the great Irish airs. And so to try and accompany it was a puzzle to me for decades. And then eventually I got a couple of ways of doing it. But the way it would sound unaccompanied is, I'll do one verse. Agus tam shall in jay. O chael me mchiala nocher. Ta shol sher shier. En skacha chango en yirien. O wajin gamien tranona. Nuair a am héin an dún an san leit go míú marún. Shellin am húlda sráteára is aríel na gwaag. Jan sa fór hinner ma hús. Mar gurbi bandu on land of Roy me. Now that was one verse, not it sounded like more than one verse. So you can hear it's a really good example of what I was saying about how in a whole culture where there wasn't accompaniment or chords or arrangement, one way of making things interesting was to have more and more elaborate melodies and interesting melodies. And it sort of changes rhythm in the middle of the verse, as far as I can see. So this is sort of the way I would do it, accompanying it and trying to keep be true to the phrasing. And one way I do it, I can flat pick it, and one way I can do it, I think I'll finger pick it. Ta bogam agus tam shelle shallen je ach al me mchiala noher ta shol du sherishier en skacha changu en yirien awajin gami Nuair a am héin an dún an san leit go míú marún. Shellin am húlas ná teára es aríel na gwaad. Jam sa fór hinner ma hús mar gurbi ban So that would be one verse of it. Now I'm doing this for the guitarists out there. I'm doing it in this dadgad guitar tuning. But if I had done it in standard tuning, it doesn't have to be complicated. And it may even, since it was, if you don't do that tuning, it might have sounded, oh, that sounds rather difficult or complicated. But it wasn't really complicated at all. I could have done exactly the same thing in standard tuning, juggling, a few chords. So let's say if it was in C, it could be C major, A minor, F, and G. That's all you need to, and done exactly the same feel. So it's a way of how you approach things. Now in the info, we were asked to provide a couple of songs that we might teach, and so I give two songs that I like, and I have sung a lot. And now I don't know whether you have them, are able to have them in front of you. The first one I was thinking was the Colleen Roo. I can probably share the words if people need that. But if you can have it, then that's great. I'm going to put them up in front of me myself, so I get paranoid about forgetting the words when I'm doing it. But in a sense, it's a simple song. But I thought it was a nice example of this kind of song that we talk about, the head schoolmaster song. And I think we kind of probably generalize about this a bit too much. But anyhow, it's a nice little category. It's a love song, and as Mairead said this morning, she was talking about the Irish language, but even in singers in English, they tend to sing love songs in English and in Irish. And this particular one, the idea of the head schoolmaster song is that you had in Gaelic culture was basically the upper part of it was lopped off almost completely by the early 1600s. Ireland before that had levels of a very aristocratic system, and it had learned bardic schools in which musicians were taught and poets were taught, and years of study and so on. It was all very elaborate. And then, when the Gaelic lords were finally completely crushed, all that was destroyed. And, you had no educational system in a sense, or no way of educating people even. So a lot of these people who had been trained as poets, and then their successors who didn't have the benefit of the bardic schools and so on, they continued their poetry, and they did some teaching, and some of them were taught in informal schools because the native Catholic people didn't have schools. And so the idea was, the hedge school was that they'd travel from place to place and they'd be teaching out under hedge, in the country. And they knew, a lot of them would have, as well as the Gaelic tradition, they would have known Latin and Greek and everything, world history and so on, Roman history and Greek history. But they brought a lot of this into the songs. And sometimes you think it's almost like they're showing off their knowledge of, they're kind of, it's like an advertisement for what a great teacher they would be and all they knew. And it just became a kind of fashion. So you have just totally serious songs that have those elements in them, and they're mentioning Greek myth and they're using big words. And then it's all spectrums today. At the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are obviously just sending the whole thing up completely, and you have comical songs that use this kind of approach, with big fancy words and so on. So this one's somewhere in between. It's a beautiful love song, and it's a wee bit over the top, and yet it's lovely. And it has, it also has this type of rhyme that derives from the Irish language. Let's say if you were able to look at the words there, the third line of the first verse: I stood a while in deep admiration, speculating what I should do, till at last recruiting all my sensations, thus I accosted the Cadinroo. Well, that's a direct imitation of the pattern in the Irish language of a type of rhyme. You could call it rhyme, or it's really a form of assonance, where the stressed vowel sound is what's important. Admiration, speculating wouldn't be a very good rhyme in English, normal English, but the important thing is that A sound: admiration, speculating. And there's some of that there through all the other verses as well. Like the third verse is a nice example, because it involved, sometimes if you know what the rhyme is supposed to be, you can tell how people pronounced it at the time. So the third verse: can sir be easy and do not tease me. Now, why am I saying easy? Because it's false praises. So the A sound is obviously what's looking for, your dissimulations and invocations. So you can see that a lot of that A sound through that verse. Anyhow, what I'll do is I'll sing it, and by halfway through the second verse, you will know the melody and you can sing along. I won't bother. Well, I'll play a wee bit of guitar with it, but I won't bother doing an arrangement or anything. As I walked out on a summer's morning, speculating most curiously, to my surprise I there espied a dazzling fair one approaching me. I stood a while in deep admiration, speculating what I should do, till at last recruiting all my sensations, I thus accosted the Cadinroo. Are you Aurora, or the goddess Flora, or Team Idora, or Venus bright, or Helen fair beyond comparison? pair that Paris stole from the Grecian side. O fairest maiden, you have ensnared me. I'm captivated in Cupid's glue. Your golden sayings and infatuations, they have ensnared me, a Holyrood. Kind sir, be easy and do not tease me with your false praises so jestingly. Your dissimulations and invocations are vaunting praises alluring me. I'm not Aurora or the goddess Flora, but a rural maiden to all men's view, that's here condoling my situation, my appellation, the Holyrood. Oh, were I Hector, that noble victor, who fell a victim to the Grecian skill, or were I Paris, whose deeds are various as an arbitrator on Ida's hill, I'd roam through Asia and Abyssinia, through Pennsylvania, courting you, the burning regions like Sage Orpheus, all for to find you, Holyrood. So it's a nice example of that, hitting the middle ground. It's also an example, to me, a thing I often think about with songs, and that is that, you know, you sort of have, well, you have two elements. You have the words and you have the melody. And sometimes the real message of the song for me is the melody. It's telling the story. So to me, you know, it might seem a bit silly and absurd, but the melody to me is gorgeous, and I love singing it. And so there's no joke in the melody for me. Like, I just think this is a beautiful love song. And sometimes the distance between the words, what the melody is saying and what the words are saying is quite large, I think, you know. But anyhow, so that's the Holyrood. I wonder, was there something else I was going to say about it? I don't think so. So that, I heard that from a recording of Paddy Tunney, who's one of the great traditional singers from the north, and he had a huge repertoire. Very, very influential singer. Could do very, very highly ornamented stuff and very virtuosic singing, and a great. So he was a great collector, and he was a great promoter and projector of the tradition. And his mother, Bridget Tunney, was a fabulous singer, and he really learned his style from her. And it was funny, Mairead was saying earlier on in the workshop that, you know, this thing about northern singers having, a lot of them singing high. Well, I don't have much of an option. I can't really sing low. But I did notice it was funny, Paddy Tunney, who often would force the top end of his register too. But I have recordings of Bridget Tunney and doing songs, and she did the same thing herself. She's some of the songs she sang, she was straining at the top end of her register, you know. So that's another thing. There's one woman we have, anyhow, who's apparently was doing the same thing. So the other song I mentioned is the Beaver Brig, that I told people I would look at, because in my well, I just love the Beaver Brig because it is very much a song. The place names in it are you know, very much to do with around where I'm from Derry, and so it's very much a local song, and it mentions McGilligan, and it mentions, so, you know, Derry was a big port for people going across to America. A lot of people went from Derry to Philadelphia, and a lot of those people who ended up in the Appalachian Mountains, that was their route. And so that's that, you know, I like the localness of it, and there's a lot of funny stuff in it. I mean, it's sort of telling probably a true story, but of the song. But he mentions Moville is a pleasant place. From Derry City, Moville is just to the north in Inishowen, and people would go to Moville for the day or on their holidays, or sometimes people who had a little bit more, slightly more money might have a house in Moville, and might have a boat, a yachting in Moville. That's my associations with that there. And you have more of the mythological references and so on. And then in the final verse, you have a puzzle that you're supposed to work out. And I learned the song and started singing it, and realized I had no idea what the solution of it was. And I still don't know the solution. And I got it from a recording of a Derry man called Brian Mullen, who's a wonderful traditional singer, and he did a lot of collecting, and he's an encyclopedia of all forms of song. So I asked him when I realized I didn't know the solution. He said, "No, I don't know he doesn't know the solution either." Now here's the funny thing about it. A funny thing about it. I probably have just time to sing through this once, but the funny thing about it is that I only know this song from Brian Mullen, and my brother learned it too, brother Andrew. And then it turns out that there were people from Arranmore. Now, Arranmore is an island off the coast of Donegal. And in the 1800s, they all emigrated to Michigan, and they settled in an island in Lake Michigan. And I now have recordings of these people. Brian Miller from here brought all this to my attention. So they had, a singing tradition, and people who would have been Irish speakers settling in this island in Lake Michigan, and it's called Beaver Island. And then, what do you know? He gave me a recording of Dominic Gallagher on Beaver Island singing the Beaver Brig, singing this song. So I just thought that was absolutely wonderful. And if there's a way, I don't know if there's a way that I can share that recording with you to send out to you maybe afterwards or something, but I'll do that. That would be a nice thing. But anyhow, here we go. I'll sing the song. And this is, we're talking about rhythm and phrasing and all. This, the way Brian Mullen sang it is fairly steady rhythm. There's nothing complicated about it. And yet it's a lovely, lovely melody, kind of hearty little melody. The beaver brig sits neat and trig all in the month of May. She hoists her sail with a pleasant gale all on the raging sea. Her crew she been well manned, and her anchor she let sway, as down the foil away did toil, bound for America. The wind it blew from the southeast, the weather it was clear. At nights when I should slumber, I think all on my dear. These words I says unto myself, as I did walk alone. I wish my darling was safe back once more to Inishowen. Moville, it is a pleasant place, where fine ships they do lie, and likewise sweet Magilligan, where fine ships they do sail by. My love, she is Diana bright, she's the girl I do adore, and she's left me here in bondage to lament on Erin's shore. Had I Peru or Mexico or India's golden store, I'd gladly share them with my love, she's the girl I do adore. For want of pen to move my hand, for learning I need skill, and my rural habitations in the centre of Moville. I love that, yes, my rural habitations in the centre of the town. I'll pluck the finest flower that grows in the month of May. I'll take 2 letters from the herb that's hoist on Patrick's Day. I'll place those letters carefully that stand at number 4, and they'll spell the name of that fair dame once sailed from Erin's shore. You know, I do have time with there, Debussy, if I can share the sound, to play you the Beaver Island version. Hang on, Debussy. See if we can master the tech. I think we can. Just sound, share. Hang on. And it is interesting to me, since I'm so obsessed about this rhythm and phrasing thing, that say Brian sang it in a very steady way. Now, this Dominic Geller, he is singing to him a different melody, slightly different melody, and the way he phrases it, very interesting. And you'll notice there are certain notes that he just holds. I mean, it's fairly moving along quite quickly or naturally, and then he holds a note longer, and it's a style that I have heard in very old recordings all over Ireland. But here we go.
With cruises then well manned, our anchor.
Hang on, I think I missed the start of it. Right, start, sorry.
The Beaver brig is neatly rigged along the region main. We have set our sails with a pleasant gale along the coast of Spain. With cruises then well manned, our anchors we did weigh, and on Lough away she board, bound for America. The wind did blow from the southwest, the weather had been clear. At night when I'm in slumber, I still think of my dear. If she'd been as loyal as I took her for to be, I'd be rolling in her arms in the land of liberty.
Isn't that lovely? And a lovely way to appreciate performances, if I use that word again, but actual individual performances of a tune or a song, is to play different people doing that thing. And it's not to show somebody up or try to make somebody sound better than another person. But, the way I sing the Beaver Brig, if you compare that with the way he sang it, the way he sings is just much more interesting than the way I sing it. I think it's really beautiful. The melody and the phrasing, I think, are really nice. Hi, Jess. How are you doing? So, hang on to see, is there anything there that I should respond to? No, she's edited out all the criticisms.